Hey guys, how's it going? I want to show you my league starter I'm going to use for PoE 3.28, the next league that comes out in, I believe, 3 days from me making this video. I am making an elementalist Crackling Lance of Branching miner build. I got this inspiration during the Frisia, or however you say that league, while I was getting religiously dicked down during campaign because I decided it'd be a grand old time to finally, learn the game myself. I saw in PoE Ninja a lot more people were using Glacial Cascade, and looking into it, I was like, oh, never used mines before. I can just slap in skills into this, like spells into this. I had no idea. 1,000 hours in, I never used that skill or never even bothered to look into it. So I threw Crackling Lance and Branching in there. I tested it out at the end of Keepers to see how it felt. I was able to do T16s, T16s and a half, T17s, and I was even able to do Ubers. So you can pretty much do whatever you want to do with this build, other than maybe like Delve or something like that. So let me just pull up like a quick little notepad I have here just so you can get a rough idea. These are just my pros and cons here, so you can kind of see if there's something you want to do. So pros, it's a one-button build. It's mines. You're just throwing out shit and stuff explodes. It's auto-targeting, technically. Mines, again. It's really high damage. It feels really good mapping. I mean, you're speedy. I don't like too fast, but it's speedy enough. It feels good. You clear the map really well, especially if Sealed Charge, because Sealed Charge is like a staple when playing Elementalist. At least for me, it is. And in this build, it's really easy to understand. It's not complicated at all. Cons. It's really not that tanky. I mean, it feels good. Like, don't get me wrong, but you're going to basically be battling with low life at some point, right? And you're gonna want to have high energy shield, like 6k or higher. You might be able to get lower, depending on how good you are at the game. If you're a gamer, you can mess around with it, and you need to figure out how chaos does not bypass energy shield. That's really important as well, because you're going to be mapping and you're going to be like, oh my god, I just died in one shot. I have like 8k energy shield. Well, what's going on? You probably died from chaos damage. That's most likely what happens, because you're only going to have like 200, 300, or 100 health, and that chaos damage is going to go through energy shield. Is going to kill you. Just some important side notes. We're scaling with, spell, lightning, and area damage. We're going to cap out our crit chance and get some crit multipliers for damage. We're going to use something called an Archdemon Crown. If you're not familiar, it's basically allows us to get like a pseudo 6 to 8 link on our helmet. And we take huge advantage of auras for damage. So yeah, I would say if you're looking for something that's fun, I might have footage before or after I say this, or both. That's fun. It fills up your screen of stuff. It's really not that blinding. It's actually visually not that bad. And you can mess with microtransactions, or even the base skill is not bad at all. But it looks really cool. It feels really satisfying. And that's usually my main things that I look for when trying to play a build, right? Disclaimer, this is my first time really doing something like this, like a build on my own. Not all this is from scratch. I got plenty of inspiration from PoE Ninja. I mean, heck, Elementalist Miner isn't new, so there was some blueprints for me to follow and get rough ideas, but some of this gear is not going to be optimized at all, and if you have any pointers or stuff, feel free to comment or, change things yourself. Feel free to always do that. So anyways, let's get into why I picked Elementalist, even with the nerf that it had with golems. So for Liege of Primordial, it's going to 50% increased effective buffs granted by your golems is not going to be there anymore. I know it sucks for a lot of you who do solely golem, building buff, whatever, stacking things, but this isn't detrimental to this build at all. We barely lose anything. We lose some DPS, maybe a little bit of from our hit pool or whatever, but it's not a big deal for us because we weren't really relying on golems to begin with. Whenever I play Elementalist mainly because it's really easy for me to get in the maps. It has Ascendancies and stuff, and with the golems, it's really easy for you to just get into maps and get going, right? There's like a huge advantage or start whenever you're starting maps with Elementalist, in my opinion. That's why I really like the Ascendancy, and I play it a lot. We pick Bastion of Elements simply because it gives us more elemental damage resistance. It's a good defense for us to have, in my opinion. The reflected elemental damage, it sucks because it doesn't really matter to us because we're using mines, but that's nice to have. You're not going to have to worry about that if you do it on their builds, so that's why Bastion of Elements, in my opinion, is really strong. Mastermind of Discord is really nice because you get exposure you inflict applies on an extra negative 25% to the affected resistance, and we get some mana regeneration per second if we oh my lord Jesus, if we inflicted exposure recently. An easy way to get exposure is like through an implicit through your gloves. So you really don't have to worry too much about how you're going to get exposure. And then we have Heart of Destruction. So Heart of Destruction's nice because we get convergence whenever we hit a unique enemy. So basically any bossing, or I believe any enemies with red or orange names. But I mainly got it so we can get a 30% increased damage buff whenever we're bossing. I don't know how well increased area effect is really good for us, right? It's nice that our Crackling Lance of Branching does, is affected by AoE, right? But how much that affects us, like compared to Glacial Cascade, I'm not too sure, because the branches can overlap with each other, and that's how we get some of the DPS that you see, is because I'm calculating the overlap. But I don't know how much that's really good for us. But I went with it anyways because the convergence I think is worth it in general. Before I get into the routes I took in the tree and why, you can see our DPS here is around 63 million. I mean, that's far more than enough than you need to really be doing anything in the game damage-wise. And we're getting some mitigation through block. That spell damage really doesn't, suppression chance doesn't really matter. I think it's one of the items that I copy from, but it doesn't matter. Anyways, but we use block chance and spell block chance for some of that mitigation because we're not that tanky, right? Especially with elementalist, you're not tanky through getting hit with physical damage. So that's something you have to be wary of. But yeah, let me explain how I calculate this DPS. So here you'll see active mines, right? So you're able to get to a point where you can see my mine throwing time is 0.34 seconds. I can probably reliably get out 7 to 10 mines at a time. A lot of times I see it hitting 10, but I hit 8 just to, be safe with it. I don't want to, I want to be as accurate as possible. So that's why I have 8 here. And you'll see a lot of the DPS goes up or down to if you mess with this or not. And I'm doing this because technically your Crackling Lance of Branching can overlap with each other. So on a clip that I will have shown already or in a few minutes of me doing an Uber, you'll see his health going down pretty fast. It's because your shotgun blasting with the mines and your Crackling Lance of Branching are all layering over top of each other. Now, I don't know how to correctly, whatever this number should actually be, but I put 3 here because I think it's reliable. You're definitely overlapping at least 2 or 3 times. And at least if I understood this correctly, this is how it should be used for. So I could be wrong, but I mean, I was doing a really good damage to Ubers. And if I'm doing really good damage to Ubers, I'm assuming this DPS is pretty accurate. To get into some more notable things on this tree, don't worry about these right here. These are just tattoos. They gave me some energy shield. I was kind of messing around with it. But some important things before the cluster are rune grafts. We get the rune graft of the fortress because it gives us increased global defenses, which also affect our energy shield. And we get rune graft of treachery because it gives us increased reservation efficiency of skills. But also note that we are using Val Discipline in this, which I'll get into later. And Val Discipline affects you and it affects enemies as well. It's not like a huge deal, but just to let you know, this will, like auras from your skills will affect aura skills, which affect allies, also affect enemies. There you go. I finally said it. And for the large cluster, I went with Overshock, simply because it gives us increased lightning damage and a little bit increased infective lightning ailments. And Prismatic Heart, because it gives us a little bit of elemental resistance, but also giving us 30% increased elemental damage. For the medium ones I have connected here, I went with Surprise Sabotage, mainly because I thought it was, the best option, or the option I wanted, alongside Guerrilla Tactics, because it gives us some increased critical strike multiplier and a little bit of elemental penetration. There are like, I think, 1 or 2 different options you can choose from that are also fairly nice, but I don't think these medium cluster jewels are that expensive, so you can play around with it if you want. Guerrilla Tactics, though, is going to be the main one you're going to want from these medium clusters, because it gives us 20% increased mine damage, it gives us some throwing speed, and it gives us some movement speed after we throw a mine. So Guerrilla Tactics is definitely a must-have for this. For jewels here, I mean, I don't have any like really good jewels on here. You probably can throw in a prismatic heart here in one of these if you really wanted to, but a lot of the jewels I have focus on increased energy shield, and increased critical strike multiplier, just to, increase our damage even more. Now, you might have noticed that I don't have anything or shown anything of how am I stopping chaos damage from going through energy shield. Right now, during all my testing and doing my T16s, T17s, whatever, I only had this selected. I had 30% of chaos damage taken, does not bypass energy shield. It's not knifes. It's nice because it can save you, but you're going to probably die every once in a while, especially if you're not paying attention to your map modifiers whenever you're juicing or whatever going through. There is a few methods I was looking at. Excuse me. Oh my god. One is, I forget the unique chests. I'm not even going to mention it because it's not worth getting. We're going to lose so much energy shield, it's not even worth contemplating. Second, and probably the method we will eventually be doing, I'm just going to wait for a future update when I actually get there into the patch with some more optimization of my build and stuff, is a specific flask. I forget what it's called, but it's a flask that doesn't allow energy shield doesn't allow chaos to bypass your energy shield, but I believe it sets your health at 1. So, which is okay, because we want to be low life specifically for Pain Attunement, because this is a huge DPS increase. 30% more spell damage is huge. If I click this button, we literally lose, like, what was that? Can I do math? 50, 60, like 14 mil DPS. Like, that's a lot. So we want Pain Attunement for sure. That's why we go low life. And the first way you're going to be able to achieve that is with auras, because we're going to use Arrogance. Now, you probably want to use Arrogance on, where is it at? Oh my god. Where are you at? No, that's not you. Okay, you don't want to use it on Val Discipline. I just forgot to change it. You're going to use Arrogance on Wrath, because Arrogance gives a 16% increased aura effect, and that just helps increase Wrath's damage it gives us. So, in essence, increases our damage even more from Wrath. So, we'll use Arrogance for that. Don't follow this. I'll change this before I post it underneath the video here. Actually, I just changed it, and I believe we went up 2 mil DPS or something like that, or like 1.5 mil. So, yeah, Arrogance, you got to pay attention to what you're using Arrogance with, and you're going to want to use it with Wrath if you can. There is going to be a point where you're not going to be able to use all these auras, but I'll get into what auras we're using here later. But yeah, they're super important. Alrighty, well, let me show you some important items or uniques or whatnot that I think are very necessary for the build in order for it to really start popping off. So first is Archon's tools. So this belt is important because it gives us Scorching Skitterbot. If you don't know what Scorching is, it lowers elemental resistance, which in essence increases our damage. It gives us increased effect of non-damaging elements from our summoned Skitterbots. We also get some quality of life with mine throwing speed, a little bit of dexterity and intelligence. Now, there is a trade-off. Whatever our Skitterbots are applying, it also applies to us. That's why you see Scorched up here. You don't see Chilled. I'm applying Chill, which is important. I'll get into that in a second. I just have something on my boots that gives me a chance to avoid it. There's probably a couple different ways. I just found this easier at the time whenever I was testing this skill at. So items I have right now aren't really like 100% optimal on this current setup, because I was just seeing if the skill was worth even using to begin with. Anyways, back to Chill. Why is that important? Because on our Archdemon Crown, I'm just terrible with words, you can get that pseudo 6 to 8 link. And one of the most important ones you can get on here is Hyperthermia. Now, what does hyperthermia do? Hyperthermia gives us more damage with hits and ailments against chilled enemies, and it gives us almost 30% more damage, which is massive. We also get a little bit of a defense because it gives us a chance to freeze enemies which are chilled. We didn't have a form of chill before, and this is a good way for us to apply it. And then another one, which isn't on this current helmet I have here, but I believe it is on the PoB helmet, is concentrated effect, because this just flat out gives us like 40% plus more area damage. So area damage can be scaled, can be used to scale our Crackling, Lance of Branching, and gives us another huge DPS boost. There are other things you can get on here, like this helmet has trap and mine damage, which is good. It's not bad. You can get some that applies 30% more elemental damage. There's a couple different variants of this helmet, so you have to look and kind of like manage what's cheap, what you can afford, because I'm going to assume the one in PoB is probably 20 divs plus, easy. So that's going to be probably your most expensive item you're going to be purchasing or trying to obtain throughout this build. Our next item is the Onyx Amulet that I've chosen. I got this because it's usually pretty cheap to obtain, and you can usually get it pretty early. This one gives us plus 3 level to our Crackling Lance gem. This helps us scale our Crackling Lance and Branching even further by adding levels to the gem. This amulet gives us some elemental resistance, which is, whatever. It's nice, but it's nothing major. And it also gives us some increased reservation efficiency of skills. 6% isn't a lot, but it helps a little bit. I'll show the auras here in a second. And it also gives us some reduced attribute requirements. So it's not the best amulet you've ever seen, but for usually the expense of it to obtain, it's well worth getting, at least in my opinion. We get some level from our wand, and I forget if I mentioned it from our crown, but this also gives us plus 2 level. So I have plus 7 level in total from my items, and then plus 1 from the corrupt, which greatly increases our overall damage. Now, to look at our auras. So obviously skitter bots is nice to have. It gives us some mind damage and gives us a couple different skitter bots that apply shock, scorch from our belt, and chill, and it increases our shock effect, and overall just damage and stuff. It's a really nice thing to have. Tempest Shield. Now, I actually got this idea from somebody else on PoE Ninja. I didn't know Tempest Shield existed. Actually, surprising enough, I just didn't know. And I put this on here because it gives us a 26% chance to block spell damage while holding a shield. And it gives us immunity shock, which I was like, I was looking for immunity shock. This gives it to us, frees up some other things for our build, and I wanted some more mitigation. So this felt like the perfect option for me to choose. And then we have Wrath. Now, if you looked at any Glacial Cascade builds going on, they have, I think, something called Hatred. And this is basically this build's equivalent to that, because it gives us added lightning damage to attacks, and it also increases our lightning spell damage. So this is just a basic damage increased aura for us. We use Zealotry because it simply gives us increased spell critical strike chance, and it gives us a little bit more spell damage. And this is automation. And then this is Discipline. We use Discipline because it gives us more energy shield. But I'm using Vowed Discipline because you can use Vowed Discipline as an energy shield health pot, because we don't have leech. You can't leech with mines unless you use, I forget what the unique glove is called. I was messing around with it. Didn't seem worth it to me to have. So I just use Val Discipline as kind of like that health pot type of thing. And if you're curious about the golems I'm choosing and why, Ice Golem, increased critical strike chance. Pretty simple. Lightning Golem gives us a little bit increased attack speed and mana regen, mainly for the mana regen. Stone Golem, because it just increases our defenses. And then Flame Golem, because it gives us a little bit more, it gives us more damage and a little bit more area effect. So I didn't do anything complex, so just have these 4 golems, and it gives us a nice little boost, especially whenever these are added early on when mapping. They're really nice to have. Now this is, my first build I'm kind of trying to do myself in PoE specifically. I've done a couple PoE 2 ones. Actually, in PoE 2, I've pretty much always built my own thing. It's pretty easy to slap some shit together, and it works, and it at least gets you through into maps. And this is my first time really delving deep into my own build. I started during the Furge or whatever event. Big mistake, by the way. Don't ever do that. But it inspired me to really learn and try to come up with my own thing. I saw the Glacier Cast thing during that event, and I was like, oh, let me use this. Let me use some of these blueprints and come up with my own shebang here. And I really enjoy this skill. I think it's super fun. Anybody could play it. I think the defense is good enough to not have to really worry about it and just go through maps if you're just a mapper and just enjoy your time. You know, I'm a big fan of Legion. I don't need to be blasting super fast. But this build I'm probably going to use and farm some Legion at first and see what other things are worth farming with the new patch and stuff like that and how the league is. So yeah, if you have any pointers or things that maybe I don't see or that might be a little more efficient, leave a comment. I'd appreciate it. If you like the video and like the idea, leave a like for me and maybe subscribe because I plan on learning from these videos I make and try to make them better in the future because again, I'm new at creating videos like this and making my own builds, and I'm gonna hopefully grow over time and hopefully make better and better videos for you guys. And again, I appreciate it. Any feedback is very appreciated. Yeah, this is all I got. If you have any questions still, or maybe I can explain something better, just leave a comment and ask, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. I appreciate it.